I absolutely adore the Yakuza series. As such, I did not just finish Yakuza Kiwami 3, I got the Platinum Trophy. So when I say that there has been a lot of controversy surrounding this remake, that is coming from somebody who would usually defend these games, like Kiryu defending a poor lady from a pack of threatening men. And wow, the chatter this time could just fill up all of the Mahjong halls. We've got story changes that have everyone arguing, like a Tojo clan budget meeting. We've got content that's been cut. We've got casting decisions that have been very, very strange. And a lot of outrage about this game that goes way beyond the medium of video games. I feel that all of this needs discussing with a clear frame of mind. So pretty much the exact opposite of what's been going on over on the Yakuza subreddit. So that's what we're doing today. We're digging into what works, what doesn't, and why a remake that improves the moment-to-moment gameplay can still leave a very strange aftertaste. So let's get cracking. We're going to kick things off with some of the changes, because there's been quite a bit of disagreement, let's say, in how the Morning Glory stuff has been handled in Kiwami 3. Let's not be revisionist here. For over a decade, the majority of people have moaned about how slow the opening hours of Yakuza 3 are. In the original release, the orphanage chapters had noble intentions, but the pacing could feel glacial at times. You signed up for bone-crushing street fights and ended up with a checklist of chores, and the contrast wasn't always very flattering. Kiwami 3 reworks this entire stretch into something far more inviting. Helping the kids with their homework becomes a small puzzle. Sewing turns into a nice little rhythm game of timing and care. Gardening and cooking provide tangible benefits, and bug catching and fishing add that classic RPG charm where even the smallest activity has its own rules and feels fun. The new request system ties everything together, trading your goods in exchange for money, supplies and upgrades for the orphanage. Instead of feeling like you're pausing the real game, this becomes the game for a while, a nice little slice of life that reinforces why Kiryu fights so hard to protect this place. And the best part is that it's optional. If you found the opening hours of Yakuza 3 a boring chore, you can now skip it entirely. I obviously didn't, I finished all of it immediately, but I have a Yakuza-shaped sickness in my heart. Now, slam the accelerator and veer into Bad Boy Dragon, which arrives with the energy of a spin-off that snuck into the wrong game. The concept is undeniably wild. Kiryu gets tangled up with a female biker gang, where all the members are called baddies, complete with turf drama and whatnot. Mechanically, the missions are fine. There's brawling, there's bike driving, there's the usual side story structure. You level up the people you recruit into the gang by completing missions and stuff like that. Tonally, though, it does feel like somebody just dropped this into the wrong place. Okinawa's sun-soaked streets and the grounded struggles of the orphanage really do clash with the exaggerated biker theatrics, and the story never quite justifies its own existence. The characters don't really get enough depth to feel meaningful, and I feel like the entire thing just kind of resolves without leaving much of an impression. It is fun in the moment, but once it's over, you're kind of left wondering why this particular detour made the cut when other better fitting ideas for Okinawa specifically would have made a lot more sense for this game. Now, the Yakuza series is absolutely prone to random sort of side content like this that do not fit the theme or the tone of the real game, but it just feels like more of an issue here and a bit of a missed opportunity given that Okinawa should be ripe for more suitable side activities than a female biker gang. Then we have Lala Mobile, a feature that sounds more important than it ends up being. The idea is to build connections with people and whatnot. It's the exact same thing as the friendship thing from Hawaii, except I found even less reason to use it here. Before we move into the combat though, if you are enjoying the video, then may I interest you in a cheeky subscribe, as we are getting close to 2,000 subscribers, and that would make me a very happy boy. Thank you very much. But now, how does it feel to beat people up? The two-style setup works really, really well in Yakuza 3 Kiwami. I'm gonna butcher the names here, I apologise. The Ryukuyu style is the flashy new toy chest packed with nunchucks and shields and stuff. It's fast, it encourages you to experiment, smacking threatening men with a thing that looks like a beach paddle, I'm sure it isn't, has a very nice bit of charm to it and really fits sort of the atmosphere of Okinawa and whatnot, while still delivering the crunchy impact that the series thrives on. I absolutely love this combat style, and I used it for the majority of my playthrough. It is just so easy to get into a flow state. Then you've got, of course, the Dragon and Dojima style, the familiar backbone with the heavy punches where you can just pick up anything and whack people with it, which really grounds the combat in the Kiryu we already know. But I like the balance between these two styles. Ryukuyu invites flair and variety, while the Dragon keeps things dependable when a fight turns serious and you want to go back to what you know. And yes, the blocking. The community dubbed it Blockuza for a reason, and while Kiwami 3 loosens the vice grip a bit, some enemies do still treat their forearms like they're made of reinforced steel. It's easier now to maneuver around guards, and you no longer feel mandatory to have to tiger drop every single enemy like you had to do in the original game. But the reliance on blocking remains puzzling in a remake. When the rest of the combat encourages creativity, running into a bunch of threatening men that can somehow block the hardest of all Kiryu punches just by sticking their arms in front of the face just seems a bit strange. However, as I said, it's much easier now to break a guard or quick step around for a free hit. The blockers of DNA only really raise its head occasionally. The Colosseum, meanwhile, remains exactly what it always has been for myself. A well-lit chore factory. The concept is fine, okay? Waves of opponents, escalating challenges, prize money, blah blah blah. But the repetition sets in very, very quickly for me. Maybe you're not supposed to do the whole thing in one go. Maybe you're supposed to go and come back. But that is just not how I play Yakuza games. Without any sort of real narrative context, it just becomes a grind that would be really easy to ignore unless you were trophy hunting or chasing completion like myself. I genuinely have no idea if I'm in the minority here, but I've just never enjoyed the Colosseum in Yakuza games. The upgrade tree is another really odd step. It's more restrained than previous entries, which feels weird. The presentation looks really, really lifeless and basic. Earlier games made growth feel like you were sculpting Kiryu into a legend once more, but here it just feels like you're ticking boxes on a form. And finally, customization for Kiryu exists, until the story decides that it doesn't. You can dress him up and give him a fresh look, which is a lot of fun in player expression and the kind of thing I think suits a remake more, but certain story beats snap him back into the classic suit with no flexibility. It is a small thing, yet it does break any sense of continuity that you build. One moment you are Kiryu the Dragon of Fashion, and then the next you're just normal Kiryu again. It seems really strange to me, but I guess suspension of disbelief and whatnot. Now, we get into one of the spiciest remake debates. Missing content. Even when what's added is solid, cutting material is a strange choice. A substantial amount of sub-stories have been removed, something like 70 plus, which is insane, and while I won't pretend Yakuza 3 had the strongest lineup of sub-stories in the series, I actually think that the original game had some of the worst sub-stories in the series, and definitely had far too many. The sheer volume gave Kamurocho and Okinawa as well a sense of constant distraction. You could wander down a street and trip over another bizarre situation that demanded Kiryu's attention, but the thing is, there's also some good sub-stories that have been removed as well, and that I find quite strange. Kiwami 3 has really trimmed it down. The new sub-stories are generally, on a whole, if you averaged it out, better sub-stories than the original game had, which I do appreciate. But there is an unavoidable trade-off. Okinawa in particular loses some of its local flavour, and Kamurocho feels much, much emptier, partly because fewer side stories are tugging at your sleeve. There's nothing obviously essential to the main plot missing, but the absence of all these sub-stories is definitely felt in the city's texture, regardless of the quality that they had. Then there are the revelations, or should I say the lack of them, because they have been removed. And I need to tread very carefully here, because I am firmly in the minority. Most fans I've seen are absolutely furious that these are gone. The over-the-top moments where Kiryu would witness something absurd and then suddenly create a new move through sheer inspiration, where peak series absurdity was sort of on show for many people. They were weird, and that's the best part of a Yakuza game, when it gets weird. But personally, I never had a huge attachment to them. I found them amusing once or twice. What I do miss, though, is Mac. The man was a legend in his own right, and his absence does leave a noticeable gap in the game's personality. Even if I'm not mourning the mechanic itself, I completely understand why other people are, and I don't really think it should have been removed. Minigames, thankfully, remain largely untouched. Karaoke is still the glittering crown jewel, letting Kiryu pour his soul into Bagamete and all that nonsense. You've got the darts and the pool, and the usual lineup return to fill out the nightlife, offering familiar distractions when you need a break from, fighting threatening men. There's nothing radically new here, but the consistency is still comforting. In a remake that removes a lot of certain features, having these staples in fact does help maintain the series' rhythm. I can't believe I'm dishing out praise for not removing series staples. So while I don't feel that anything crucial has been stripped away from the game in this regard, the act of removal itself is always really contentious. A remake invites comparison by its very nature. Every missing sub-story and every absent mechanic will become a conversation, even when the replacements for these sub-stories, for example, are stronger. People will still ask why the old pieces couldn't coexist alongside the new, and there's also no reason why certain side stories from the original that were good aren't in the new game. But now let's take a breather from mechanics and talk about the place, because setting has always been one of the secret sources of the Yakuza formula. Okinawa remains an absolute triumph, the coastline, the ever-present shimmer of the sea. It creates a really laid-back atmosphere that no other location in the series really manages to get right. It is a rare setting in this series where Kiryu isn't swallowed by neon and concrete. Instead, he feels really rooted. The morning glory is just all up in his grill. The remake preserves that mood beautifully, and the added activities around the orphanage do deepen your connection to the region. Kamurocho, by contrast, feels really diminished. I have always said that Kamurocho basically feels like home at this point to me, which is what happens when you spent as much time playing Yakuza games as me. You can remove the minimap and waypoints, and we all know where we're going. The map itself is, of course, the familiar entertainment district we've run through countless times, but the reduced number of sub-stories and side distractions does leave stretches of it feeling a lot more like backdrop, and that is never something that Kamurocho has ever really been. You can still eat, fight, and wander around, but there are fewer moments where the city grabs you and drags you into it, and I feel that's a real shame. But now it is time to get controversial. It's time to discuss the story. This part of the video is spoiler free, but we will be getting into spoilers later, as, well, we kind of have to, and if you've played the game you'll know why, but I will warn you again before that happens, so relax. At its core, the plot is a collision between two worlds Kiryu refuses to abandon. On one side, the Morning Glory orphanage, where he's trying to build a stable life for the children who depend on him. On the other, the gravitational pull of the Tojo clan, political corruption, land disputes, and the endless cycle of violence that keeps dragging him back into the underworld. The central conflict revolves around a resort development scheme tied to military land and the CIA, and the Tojo clan power struggles is just always crazy. It is a story about territory and legacy and who gets to decide the future of a place and its people. Kiryu's role is about protection. He's fighting to preserve a home, not to take over the land. And this is where the themes really shine, I think. Finding your family really does sit at the centre, not as a sentimental garnish, but as Kiryu's guiding principle. Morning Glory represents a future built on care rather than hierarchy. In contrast, the Yakuza world clings to its rigid structures and its inherited grudges. The game constantly asks whether you can escape the roles assigned to you, or if the past is a chain that tightens the moment you try to step away. And how could we ever talk about the story of Yakuza 3 without mentioning Rikiya? He is the emotional anchor that makes these themes tangible. He is earnest to a fault, a young man who idolises the Yakuza he's never truly known, seeing honour and brotherhood where Kiryu sees loss and regret. His loyalty to Kiryu is immediate and wholehearted, not because of his reputation, but because he recognises a man trying to live by a code that protects the vulnerable. Rikiya's enthusiasm, his awkward attempts to prove himself, and his genuine kindness make him feel really disarmingly real. He bridges the gap between the romantic image of the Yakuza and the painful reality behind it. Through him, we see what draws people to that life and why it's so hard to walk away. His presence adds a lot of warmth and levity, and I still feel he's one of the best characters in the entire series. And then we have Mine, one of the series' most compelling antagonists. Where Rikiya represents naive admiration, Mine embodies the corrosive side of loyalty. He is disciplined and intelligent. His clashes with Kiryu aren't merely just physical, they are ideological, because both men are fighting for what they believe is worth saving, and neither really thinks themselves the bad guy. Which is why the changes to character portrayals hit so badly. Rikiya's redesign softens the visual storytelling that once communicated his wide-eyed admiration for a past he never even lived through. The original look told you everything at a glance. This was someone playing dress-up with an identity he didn't fully understand. The new design is serviceable, and it does actually grow on you, but it does lose that immediate clarity, and it is a change that I wouldn't say ruins the character, but it does remove a layer of meaning that didn't need replacing. And then there is, of course, the recasting of Hamazaki, which moves beyond creative decision-making into some deeply uncomfortable territory, hiring an actor with a known history of sexual offences and attempting to justify it with the claim that the character himself is creepy bro is indefensible. It casts a shadow over every scene he appears in and shifts the conversation from the narrative intent of the scene to the real-world lack of accountability. Instead of discussing Hamazaki's role in the story, we're left grappling with the decision behind the casting, and that distraction undermines the integrity of the experience. I cannot emphasise enough how much I detest RGG for making this decision. Despite these issues though, the core story does remain powerful. Yakuza 3 didn't age well in terms of gameplay, but I always felt it had one of the strongest stories in the series. Kiryu's struggle to protect a fragile home while confronting a world that refuses to let him go is as compelling as ever. Rukia brings the heart, Mine brings the tragedy, and the themes of belonging and the legacy and the cost of loyalty still resonate, and I feel that's what makes the later retcons and alterations so frustrating. The foundation was already strong. It didn't need to be rewritten to matter, but as we do know, some things did get rewritten, so this is now the spoiler warning. Skip to the time on screen now if you want to avoid. I am literally about to tell you how the game ends. Okay, so in the original Yakuza 3, Mine sacrifices himself in a desperate heroic act, throwing both himself and Richardson off a building to stop the threat once and for all. Hamazaki, in his final act of aggression, stabs Kiryu before Kiryu leaves for Okinawa and is then arrested. These moments tie up the arcs very, very cleanly. Mine fulfills his journey. Kiryu survives the chaos he reluctantly navigated, and Hamazaki's actions carry consequences that lead into the next game in the series. The stakes feel absolute because the choices and sacrifices are irreversible. When a character dies, they die for a reason, and they are supposed to be dead. Kiwami 3, however, decides to change things for a giggle, I guess. Mine somehow survives the fall and intervenes to stop Hamazaki from stabbing Kiryu. Then, rather than facing justice, he recruits Hamazaki into the Daidoji. This creates a ripple effect that undermines several narrative threads for future games. Hamazaki never goes to prison for stabbing Kiryu, so he never meets Saejima, which erases their prison breakout connection entirely, which would mean that Saejima can't get out of prison. Mine's heroic sacrifice, one of the most defining moments of his character, is replaced with survival and political manoeuvring, robbing his arc of the catharsis it had in the original game. The new ending sacrifices narrative clarity for a new plot twist that ultimately makes less sense the more you think about the themes that the game has been spending the entire time building up. You could argue that Mine surviving doesn't undermine the sacrifice, as he still jumped off the roof. But he no longer paid the ultimate price for his redemption. It was so unnecessary. The original narrative already delivered a complete arc for Mine, a tragic endpoint that gave his ideology consequences and his loyalty a cost. So, what's the plan here? 4 Kiwami? More Mine games? A Daidoji game? Where we find out every character that's ever died is actually just yet another man who erased his name? It's stupid, I hate it, and it seems as though right now it was done for no reason. Speaking of Mine, there's also the Dark Ties campaign that's been bundled in with this. Now, I think they have oversold exactly what this is. Before we discuss it properly, if you had zero interest in playing Kiwami 3, do not buy this just for Dark Ties. The main story takes around 3 hours, but with side content and obviously all the trophies that I got, it took me 8 hours to finish it, but there was a lot more content I could do, but it was just filler busy work. Your enjoyment of Dark Ties massively revolves around whether you care at all about Mine. If the answer is yes, then there is value here for sure. Mine already stands shoulder to shoulder with the series' best antagonist in my eyes, not because he's sort of worse than them, but sort of the opposite. Everything he does comes from a warped hunger for belonging. Dark Ties lets you watch him operate outside the main plot's collision course with Kiryu. He is calculating and composed, always 3 steps ahead in a room full of men who think that brute force counts as strategy. Seeing that side of him reinforces why his ideology is so dangerous. He genuinely believes he is doing the right thing. The story spends a lot of time on Kanda as well. The story tries to frame his relationship with Mine as very important, but he has the screen presence of a folding chair. He is very loud where Mine is controlled. He is very impulsive where Mine is precise. And instead of forming a compelling contrast, he mostly exists just to make Mine look cooler, is the only conclusion I can come to. If you went into this hoping that the game would somehow redeem Kanda, then you will come out with the same shrug you had before. I've never really cared for Kanda as a character, so maybe I'm biased. The side content built around improving Kanda's public image is just an excuse for Mine to have sub-stories. You're running errands to make him look respectable because you're sort of cleaning up Kamurocho in the name of Kanda, yet Kanda isn't doing anything. It doesn't make any sense. There is no wild left turn here or a heartfelt gut punch. There's no moment where you stop and think, only this series could have managed that. You help people, you get more points and more money, and that is about it. It's functional, it's, yeah. Then survival hell comes and just kicks the door down. This mode is the real reason to spend time with Dark Ties. You descend through dungeon phases that feel much closer to a gauntlet than a side activity, scavenging gear, unlocking companions, clawing your way toward bosses that do not care how many street punks and threatening men you've flattened on your way in. The difficulty ramps up with a real cruel elegance. The sort of early runs lull you in to thinking that this is going to be nice. This is not going to be nice. Later runs will punish very sloppy play. You will lose your health. You will think that your weapons and companions will help you, and they won't. By the final dungeon, you are staring down one of the toughest challenges in any RPG game. I had to backtrack, I had to grind earlier floors, and rethink my entire approach just to stand a chance. When you finally manage to clear this, it does feel earned in the purest sense, but again, I did the whole thing as soon as I unlocked it, so maybe you're supposed to go away and come back, but again, that's just not how I play these games. There's also a Colosseum variant that's tucked into here, and it lands with all the excitement. I can't even think of anything more boring. It's the same wave-based combat loop that the normal Kiwami 3 has. After the tension and the escalation of survival hell, this feels really flat. You can engage with it if you really want to, but I don't like the Colosseum, man. You've also then, of course, got Mine's combat. You have these 3 hearts that you build up and then can just basically turn on beast mode and massacre everybody. I didn't like it at first, but it did grow on me the further I got into the survival hell side content, and I thought some of the combos were really fun the further down the upgrade tree you go, but I don't really feel like it really leans into Mine's personality as much as it probably could have done, but again, it's fine. So Dark Ties ends up as a real mixed plate. Mine gets some richer characterization, but I don't really think it sort of changes his character all that much. Kanda remains aggressively uninteresting. The reputation errands blur together. Survival hell, wow. So, as an enormous fanboy who's played every single Yakuza game available in the West and platinumed Yakuza Kiwami 3 and Dark Ties, what went wrong? As a package, it is surprisingly robust for a game that used to have a reputation for being one of the shorter entries in the series. The sort of separated Morning Glory activities transform what was once a pacing roadblock into a highlight. Combat does feel faster and far less dependent on one overpowered counterattack. Ryukyu style injects a playful streak into fights that fit Okinawa's atmosphere, while still letting Dragon Dojima bring the bone-breaking familiarity. Even some of the new side content, when it lands, does add a lot of flavour rather than filler. Moment to moment, this is simply a more enjoyable game to play than the original. If you handed both versions to someone with no nostalgia attached at all, there is a very strong chance they would say that Yakuza Kiwami 3 is the better game. And that is what makes the story changes so annoying, because none of them needed to happen. The story changes will unfortunately define Kiwami 3. It is a better game in your hands, it is more generous with things to do, yet as a steward of the story, it makes choices that feel out of step with what made that story work in the first place. You can have a great time playing this game and still walk away wishing that the past had been left intact. I think if you had played Yakuza 0 through to Kiwami 2 and didn't know whether to play Kiwami 3 or OG 3, if you can get your hands on it anyway, another inexcusable decision to delist the original game, by the way, that I think that the best way to play is to play Kiwami 3 and then look up the original ending on YouTube, then move on to Yakuza 4. But by the time you get halfway through Yakuza 4, you will be annoyed at one of the dumbest plot twists in any video game ever to even remember how Yakuza 3 ended. That's right, I went there. And maybe this is sort of the strongest aspect though. This remake proves that improvement and disappointment can share the same space, and I find that really, really interesting, and I hope that none of the threatening men in the comments will disagree with me. If you made it this far into the video, thank you very much. I have just seen how long I've been ranting for. This is the longest video I've done in a while, so if you enjoyed it, then please leave a like, because I will have put a lot of effort into this one by the time it goes out. So I just really, really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos from me, then subscribing is always a great option because I upload at least one video a week. And we've also recently enabled memberships on the channel, so if you want to support the videos and get access to early videos, then hurrah, the option is there, but feel no pressure, it's fine. Either way, I will see you whenever I upload another video, probably next Monday. I will see you then. Goodbye.